Will you be traveling to the States anytime soon? Not ever. I wouldn't go over the border again. That quiet reply from a Canadian traveler is now echoing across America's northern edge through empty parking lots, shuttered gas stations, and faded motel signs. In once bustling border towns like Blaine, Niagara Falls, and Point Roberts, something strange is happening. The neighbors have stopped coming, and with them an entire rhythm of life is disappearing. But what if that silence isn't the end of the story? What if it's an invitation? In this video, we take you on a journey through 10 forgotten American towns, places that once thrived on the steady heartbeat of cross-border visits and are now slowly fading into memory. This isn't just about economics or politics, it's about hidden places, untold stories, and the chance to see a side of America that's vanishing before our eyes. So if you're a traveler who believes the most powerful journeys happen off the beaten path, subscribe, like, and join us. These towns aren't just stories of decline. They might just be your next unforgettable stop. Number 1. Blaine, Washington. The weekend economy collapse. Once a quiet outpost in the Pacific Northwest, Blaine, Washington survived and thrived not by innovation or tourism, but by proximity. Just south of the Canadian border, Blaine became a weekend haven for thousands of British Columbians. They came for cheaper gas, American groceries, Amazon pickups, and bulk purchases. This wasn't tourism. This was routine, and it was everything. By 2025, that routine shattered. Amid rising trade tensions, new taxation on Canadian imports, and anti-Canadian political rhetoric, cross-border travel from British Columbia plummeted. According to the Chicago Tribune, vehicle crossings at Blaine dropped over 75% within the first 6 months of the year. The impact was swift and ruthless. Gas stations shut down. 24-hour package depots vanished overnight. The economy, built entirely on stopover behavior, imploded. Residents who had no other source of income than Canadian consumers faced sudden unemployment. Local businesses, once booming without the need for reinvention, now sit abandoned. Social media in Canada became a battleground. The hashtag #BuyCanadianFirst surged with influencers showcasing grocery hauls from London Drugs and Save on Foods. What had once been a casual drive to Blaine became a statement of economic sovereignty. Blaine, in turn, became a symbol of American overdependence. Blaine's story isn't just about job loss. It's about a town realizing too late that its prosperity was never self-owned. It was borrowed. And when the neighbors stopped knocking, the foundation cracked. Number 2. Niagara Falls, New York echoes beneath the water. Few places in America are as synonymous with tourism as Niagara Falls. And yet in 2025, the U.S. side of the falls began to mirror something unsettling: silence. Hotels that once required reservations months in advance were offering last-minute deals at $45 a night. Ontario license plates once flooding the streets were nowhere to be found. The decline wasn't due to recession or disaster. It was a choice. Canadians from Toronto, Hamilton, and Ottawa no longer crossed the Rainbow Bridge for outlet shopping, casino nights, or chain restaurant dinners. With comparable prices now available in Ontario and an unwelcoming atmosphere festering across the border, the flow stopped. Data from the U.S. Bureau of Transportation Statistics confirmed a 60% drop in vehicle crossings compared to 2024. The fallout hit fast. Souvenir shops collected dust, restaurants closed entire wings. Resorts shut down indefinitely, laying off hundreds. Worse yet was the demographic shift. Young workers once employed in service roles or tourism gigs started leaving. Cities like Detroit, Fremont, and Denver, with tech jobs and stable industries, offered a future Blaine and Niagara no longer could. The aging population that remained held onto memories, not momentum. Niagara Falls isn't just losing visitors, it's losing its identity. The roar of the falls remains, but the economic heartbeat has gone quiet. This isn't a slow season. This is systemic collapse. As two of the most well-known border towns on opposite coasts, Blaine and Niagara Falls, show what happens when international interdependence becomes a single point of failure. The silence is not temporary. It's structural, and more towns will follow. Number 3. Point Roberts, Washington, the town America forgot. Imagine living in the United States but having to pass through another country just to buy groceries. That's Point Roberts, a geopolitical oddity dangling from Canada's border. Technically American, but functionally detached. It has no school, no hospital, no full grocery store. For decades, residents relied almost entirely on nearby Vancouver for essentials. But in 2025, those lifelines began to fray. Canada, without formally closing the door, simply stopped holding it open. Tighter customs enforcement, stricter delivery regulations, and deprioritized services turned routine errands into logistical nightmares. A trip for milk became a gamble. Prescriptions were delayed. Fuel deliveries came sporadically, if at all. Point Roberts operates under U.S. law but survives on Canadian mercy. And when that mercy faltered, the town began to suffocate. The only gas station reduced service to 3 days a week. Cafes shuttered. Post office hours were slashed. A community that once embraced retirement and serenity now finds itself trapped by isolation. What makes Point Roberts uniquely fragile is that it's not just economically dependent, it's logistically tethered to another nation. Without Canada's daily flow, the supply chain collapses. And because there's no viable mainland connection, the town can't redirect. It can only wait. Residents are leaving. Not in droves, but in quiet succession. Homes won't sell. Services can't scale. Young people have long avoided the area. Now even older residents, once drawn by the peace, see that same peace as a form of abandonment. Point Roberts hasn't just been cut off, it's been slowly erased. Number 4. Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. 2 cities, 1 broken bridge. Split by a narrow stretch of water and a single bridge. Sault Ste. Marie in Michigan and its Canadian counterpart once mirrored each other, a tale of cross-border kinship. Canadians came daily to the U.S. side for gas pharmacy stops, electronics and meals. They weren't tourists, they were economic lifeblood. That blood stopped flowing in March 2025. Vehicle traffic from Ontario dropped by over 57% in just 3 months, not because of a policy, but because of fatigue. Cumbersome paperwork, long waits, and worsening currency exchange made the trip less appealing. On the Canadian side, new shopping centers and pharmacies eliminated the need to cross at all. The results were immediate. Small electronics stores went part-time, diners cut staff and hours, grocery chains halted bulk orders. One by one, businesses began to wobble under the weight of vanishing demand. Meanwhile, across the bridge, Ontario's version of the town saw a small boom. More jobs, more services, more stability. The same geography, 2 diverging futures. What makes Sault Ste. Marie's case so alarming is its symbolic rupture. One town splits into 2 paths simply because the invisible thread of interdependence was pulled. For residents of the U.S. side, the change is existential. They were never built for tourism but for interconnection. And now, cut off from it, they're floating untethered. Real estate listings in Michigan's Chippewa County have surged. Those who can leave do. Others juggle multiple part-time jobs to keep the lights on. Hope now comes in whispers. Maybe the border traffic will return, maybe the exchange rate will shift. But the reality grows harder to ignore. Sault Ste. Marie isn't in a slump, it's in a separation. Number 5. Calais, Maine. When the kitchen closes across the border. For decades, Calais wasn't famous, but it was familiar. To thousands of Canadians in St. Stephen, New Brunswick, Calais was their unofficial pantry. A short hop over the bridge brought access to cheaper groceries, over-the-counter medications, and quick lunches. It was a cross-border ritual, not a tourist trip. You didn't visit Calais, you used it. That ritual collapsed in the spring of 2025. According to U.S. Customs and Border Protection, vehicle crossings at the Milltown and Ferry Point bridges dropped more than 64% compared to the previous year. There was no ban, no protest, just a shift in behavior. Canadian supermarkets expanded. Local pharmacies added new services. The convenience of staying put combined with tighter customs and a weaker exchange rate made the decision easy. Why cross the border when everything you need is already home? Calais didn't fall all at once. It faded. First, the grocery store by the bridge cut hours. Then family-owned restaurants trimmed menus and shortened weekends. Pharmacies stopped stocking Canadian-favored brands. The question, how much is that in Canadian, disappeared from checkout counters. But what hit hardest wasn't economic, it was emotional. Seniors who once exchanged friendly hellos with Canadian neighbors now sit alone in half-empty diners. Homes are going up for sale even in what should be the busy summer season. But few are buying. Because a town built to serve someone else loses its purpose when those customers vanish. Across the bridge, St. Stephen is thriving. Bright new shops, full parking lots, hiring signs. Calais, by contrast, is becoming a still kitchen. The stove is there, the lights still work, but no one comes to cook anymore. Number 6. Darby Line, Vermont. A border painted in disconnection. Darby Line once represented something rare, a border defined not by fences but by shared footsteps. It's one of the few places where a single building sits in two countries. You could read a book in the US with your feet in Canada. Locals lived a daily cross-border blend, shopping here, praying there, eating on both sides. But starting in early 2025, that daily dance came to a stop. Vehicle crossings from Stansted, Quebec into Darby Line dropped by over 66% in just 3 months. There was no diplomatic blow-up, no viral controversy. Just changes, more forms at customs, slower processing, fewer perks. Enough to break a habit. Darby Line wasn't built for grand tourism. It existed through continuity. Canadians picked up cold medicine, hand sanitizer, a loaf of cinnamon bread. Small purchases, but consistent. They kept the pharmacy open, helped pay the librarian's salary, and filled church pews. Now the silence speaks louder than protests. The local bakery still opens, but no longer needs a second baker. The pharmacy stopped ordering French-language packaging. Church attendance dropped by a third. At community meetings, the Quebecois accent is missing. The Haskell Library remains half in each country, but only one side still turns the pages. Darby Line is not dying in drama. It's vanishing in subtlety. No empty shelves, just half-filled pews. No storefront collapses, just shorter business hours. This isn't decline through disaster, it's erosion through absence. Number 7. Houlton, Maine. A town erased by GPS. Houlton never needed to advertise. Positioned at the end of Interstate 95, it was the last American town before the Canadian border, and that was enough. Canadians from New Brunswick didn't come for leisure. They stopped out of habit. It was where you filled your tank, grabbed snacks at Walmart, maybe picked up a parcel or got your oil changed. Houlton thrived not because it was special, but because it was on the way. Until it wasn't. In early 2025, something changed, not abruptly, but definitively. Canadians began avoiding the Houlton crossing. According to U.S. Bureau of Transportation Statistics, vehicle traffic dropped more than 68% year over year. There was no official closure, no viral incident, just a series of small shifts, more complex paperwork, a worse exchange rate, more efficient routes elsewhere. Slowly, Houlton disappeared from the cross-border itinerary, and once it was skipped, it was forgotten. The signs still glow, the pumps still work, but the flow of people, what kept this microeconomy running, has dried up. Walmart now stocks less. The massive parcel depots that once buzzed with Amazon packages are on the verge of shuttering. A gas station that operated 12 pumps now uses only 4. Businesses didn't lose customers to competitors. They lost them to a change in direction. Residents are confused and scared. There was no warning. No one declared that Houlton was obsolete. But when the weekend comes and no one asks where the nearest gas station is, you realize something's wrong. Deeply wrong. Houlton is becoming something it never planned, for a place people no longer need. A bend in the road that's been straightened out by modern logistics. And in a world that reroutes without ceremony, the town has been digitally and economically erased. Number 8. Massena, New York, when big names vanish first. Massena was never flashy, but for thousands of Canadians from Cornwall, Ontario, it was reliable. They came for low prices, broad selections, and smooth border crossings. Weekends meant gas fill-ups. Walmart runs visits to the mall. It was all routine, predictable, profitable, until it wasn't. Since early 2025, vehicle traffic across Massena's border bridge has collapsed by over 70% per U.S. Customs and Border Protection. The reasons are familiar: a tightening of Canadian customs procedures, a weaker Canadian dollar, and a growing sense that the border just isn't worth the effort. With retail options expanding in Cornwall, the incentive to cross faded fast. The first signs of trouble weren't the mom-and-pop shops. It was Walmart and Target. The big names, the ones seen as too large to leave, simply packed up and shut down. Their exits weren't announced with town halls or public notices. One morning they were open, the next the parking lots were empty. A silent retreat. Massena's residents were left stranded, not in poverty but in limbo. Grocery options dwindled. Essentials like baby formula medication, even pet food, became harder to find. Seniors, single parents, and carless residents found themselves in a logistical desert. People still live here, but now they must drive over 30 minutes to find what used to be 5 minutes away. The psychological blow was even worse. When the big stores left, it sent a clear message: this town no longer matters. No farewell, no explanation, just darkness where the lights used to be. Today, Massena feels like a town paused in time. Streets remain swept, houses are still occupied, but economically it has dropped off the map. Not poor enough to qualify for urgent aid, not thriving enough to attract investment. Just stuck. Number 9. Port Angeles, Washington, when the tide stops coming in. For years, Port Angeles was the quiet jewel of the Olympic Peninsula, a serene coastal town tethered to Canada by the rhythmic arrival of the Black Ball Ferry. Every morning, the ferry from Victoria, British Columbia brought a small army of Canadian day trippers. They weren't lavish spenders, but they came reliably to stroll the boardwalk, sip local coffee, buy cosmetics or electronics, and then return across the water by dusk. That tide began to recede in 2025, and it hasn't returned. According to a report from the Port of Port Angeles, ferry passenger numbers dropped more than 64% in less than a year. Why not because of tragedy? Not because of outrage. Just because the incentives eroded. Ferry ticket prices climbed, border procedures became sluggish, and across the water in Victoria, new outlet stores and updated shopping hubs made the trip seem unnecessary. The ferry still runs, but it's often half empty. The collapse wasn't explosive, it was gradual. First came the trimmed restaurant menus, then the boutiques cut their hours. Some hotels stopped accepting weekend reservations altogether. The service workers, once proud of offering warm welcomes and scenic escapes, have moved on. Many now juggle part-time delivery work or leave the hospitality sector entirely. But the deepest loss isn't measured in dollars. It's in atmosphere. The boardwalk still shimmers. The ocean breeze still hums. But no one disembarks. The benches that once hosted elderly Canadians sharing stories now sit empty. Lights along the waterfront flicker on every evening, but not for anyone. Port Angeles didn't do anything wrong. Its charm remains. Its people are kind. But connection once taken for granted has evaporated. And in a world that moves fast, being beautiful is no longer enough to stay relevant. Number 10. Pembina, North Dakota, the warehouse that emptied overnight. Unlike the others, Pembina was never meant for beauty. It wasn't built for tourism or culture. It existed for one purpose: logistics. A warehouse town that lived and thrived on Canadian pickups. For years, residents of Winnipeg and rural Manitoba crossed the Pembina-Emerson border to collect parcels from Amazon, eBay, and US retailers. No sightseeing, just business. Then in 2025, the machine stopped. Winnipeg-based shopper forums began sounding the alarm. Customs declarations had become a nightmare, fees were climbing, and the exchange rate crushed every bargain. Influencers warned, don't bother picking up from Pembina anymore. It's not worth it. And that was it. In less than 3 months, traffic through the crossing dropped over 72% according to the Canada Border Services Agency. The effect was nuclear. Amazon's logistics partner shut down its Pembina operation. FedEx cut hours to part-time. UPS opened just 2 days a week. Entire blocks of parcel depots once teeming with pickups are now fenced off and gathering dust. Warehouses that used to hum like servers now echo like abandoned mills. The worst part, Pembina had no backup plan. No retail district, no tourism, no alternative industries. It was a town of parking lots, tracking numbers, and efficient zip codes. And when the traffic stopped, so did its purpose. Now Pembina is a relic, a town bypassed by modern convenience. The parcel lights still blink, but not for anyone. Retired locals still open their doors each morning out of habit more than hope. But they know, no one's coming. Port Angeles and Pembina show two extremes of collapse, one poetic, one surgical. One town, a romantic waterfront fading like an old photograph. The other, a logistical juggernaut undone by a single behavioral shift. What unites them is the same devastating lesson repeated across this series: when a town builds its survival on a neighbor's habits, it builds its future on sand. This is not an isolated crisis. It's a warning. A cautionary tale for any American town living off borrowed attention. Because once that attention is redirected, even politely, even quietly, the lights dim, the doors close, and the silence becomes permanent. If you found this series revealing, remember what's happening on the edges today could come to your doorstep tomorrow. Stay informed, stay curious, and above all, stay connected.